Welcome to the Clinical Cookout. Hey now, it's your Auntie Ashley.
What's up? It's your girl, Auntie Shug.
Sounds right.
Hey, it's your girl, Auntie Quiche.
Hey y'all, it's Auntie Amber.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. We are qualified clinicians who will cover various topics on mental health and will sometimes provide community resources. We are not being paid by any organization for our content, and any information we provide is general and pertains to our own personal experiences. We do not provide psychotherapy, diagnoses, or treatment recommendations on air. Any concerns related to your individual mental health should be directed to your medical and mental health professionals. We are not responsible for others' decisions or the subsequent consequences.
Welcome to the Clinical Cookout. For this series, we will be talking about sensitive topics. Those topics include sexual abuse, sexualization of both boys and girls, as well as providing treatment and interventions. We would like to remind you that we are not your therapist. However, you can continue to view the content at your discretion.
So sexualization is to make something sexual in character or quality, or to become aware of sexuality, especially in relation to men and women. Sexualization is linked to sexual objectification. According to the American Psychological Association, sexualization occurs when individuals are regarded as sex objects and evaluated in terms of their physical characteristics and sexiness. Okay, so clearly this is a tougher subject to even start with. It's not something that's easy to talk about, even for us. And we are all professionals, may have worked with clients who have had certain sexual trauma situations or women who've been sexualized as young girls. So even for us, this is hard to talk about. So that's why we were quiet for such a long pause, because we really just want to bring this in a way that's not triggering, but we know this is a triggering topic, so it's kind of hard to even jump out with it.
Well, full transparency, as a clinician who's worked with young girls who have been sexualized, it's never easy. I struggle a lot with that. I struggle a lot with helping them process and address the trauma associated with that. I have learned that a lot of times young girls are shamed for their natural bodies. And, you have a young girl who is shapely and can't help that. She didn't do that to herself. She didn't create her body like that. But wearing certain pieces of clothing is looked at as sexual, or, you're trying to be a hoe, you're being fast. So it's really tough to hear that, because these young girls grow up and they are ashamed of their body.
You mostly tell these young girls that they can't wear certain things. Like who have you guys mostly witnessed tell them?
Their mothers, grandmothers, and aunts. It actually comes more so from women.
Wow, that's different. In my experiences, it's the fathers, the dads, that are the ones that are like, no, you can't wear those short shorts. You can't wear that short skirt. It's revealing too much. That's too sexy. You need to, well, dads don't use the term sexy, but essentially implying that you need to change into something bigger. No form-fitting clothes.
Dads do it for sure as well. And I've heard dads do it, but it comes from it comes from a different place for dads, because even if you have an older girl, like a teenage age girl who is, growing into herself, learning more about her body and everything, and she wants to wear certain things, dads are doing it because they have this idea of, I know what boys are like because I once was one. So I don't want you to go out like that, because they're going to have a certain impression of you. Mothers and aunts are doing it because, and I'll never forget, my grandmother told me, once you are labeled a hoe, you will always be a hoe. I don't care what success you have, what you do as a woman and a Black woman. Once you get that label, it's there forever. A man can go outside butt naked and he will be called Mr. So-and-so the next day. You will never have your reputation back. So it was different. when my uncles would say it versus when my grandmother and my mother or my aunts would say it.
Well, let's dig in a little bit into how that, like where that comes from. Because when we're talking about sexualizing, we're talking about essentially this idea that dressing a certain way is considered sexy, or dressing, revealing, or like expressing yourselves in certain ways is considered sexy. And it's going to draw this particular type of attention. So don't do it. It's not okay to do it. But where do those ideas come from? Like, where did this start? How, like, I know we might not know all of that, but from y'all's perspective or from your knowledge, like, what do you think about that?
I think one of the reasons why some people worry so much about what you're kind of putting out there is because of feedback. Typically what you put out is what you get back. And so a lot of people think that if you putting out, sexual vibes, or if a young girl looks like she's putting out sexual vibes, then she's going to attract the wrong type of attention. At least that's always been the way that I've heard it, is like, if you're dressing a certain kind of way, it's suggestive. And another thing too is, one thing I did notice is that I spent a lot of time in Europe, and there's a big sex trafficking. Like, there's sex trafficking rings all over the place. And so when you're, young girls, they're looking for young girls. They're looking for virginity. They don't want nobody old and with inexperience. They're looking for young girls that they can exploit. And so when you have your young girl dressed a certain kind of way, or when a young girl is dressed a certain kind of way, it draws the type of attention that people don't necessarily want. And so I think that people are like, mothers, fathers, aunts, and everything, they're trying to be protective, but it comes off as shameful sometimes.
Yeah, and historically, the protective part is important. That's really important if we just take it back to the origins of, 16, 17, 1800s for Black girls in particular, slavery. I mean, there was fear. There still is fear of being harmed, being raped, being molested. So it's like, I'm doing this to protect you from that. But like you said, Auntie Shug, it has veered from protection to now shame, like shaming you for any and everything that can be remotely seen as sexy or sexual.
I would say that it's not a one size fit all as far as like where it comes from. I feel like it comes from all different areas, whether it's in the church, whether it's at school, when it comes to school uniforms or dress codes. I feel like it comes from all different areas. But one of the things I thought was interesting is that I think I saw a Facebook post a while ago, and a little girl, she couldn't have been no more than 3, 4, and she had on a 2-piece swimsuit. And the amount of people that was on there talking about how she was dressed too grown, talking about, oh, well, she has a 2-piece on. And I'm like, she's 3. So how did we shift from a 3-year-old literally just existing to now all of a sudden she's too grown to wear a 2-piece? And I find it interesting when people talk about protecting, that they're saying these things to protect, but really they're only trying to protect one person. And it's never the female. It's, oh, well, you can't dress like this because you're a female. Well, what about the people who are attracted to this girl? They always get left out of the equation. And so for me, I feel like I understand people's intention, but it's never, to me, as from what I see, it's never intended to protect this female or this little girl. Because if it is, then there needs to be accountability held somewhere. And it can't just be always the person who's dressed this way. It can be on the people who are looking at this child like this. So.
But how do you know who's looking? How do you know where they're looking from? Like, how do you, because, people don't have sex trafficker or predator written on their foreheads. So how do you know who you're protecting them from?
You don't. That's just the risk of living in this world. The worry that parents have naturally is you can't know, but you also can't place your child in a bubble forever. And you also, I personally feel like I can't make decisions based off of that and that alone. and I will not put shame into my child based off of that. So
Well,
a
let's
3-year-old
also.
baby. Oh, go ahead, Amber.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say let's also think about the parents who, or even adults in a child's life who have been sexually abused. So as Keisha's talking, I'm thinking like, you hear that you shouldn't dress a certain way, you shouldn't, be revealing or whatever, and then you dress that way, you're sexually abused, molested, assaulted, raped, whatever term you want to use, by an older man as a child. You grow up to be a parent, and that is your way of trying to protect your child from experiencing something that you've experienced. And of course, that's not always the case, but if we're looking at it in terms of like, where does it come from? A lot of that is trauma responses of the adults too. Mm-hmm. Because remember, we're talking about slavery, and even post-slavery, that was also a big thing in our community, not just white people raping Black girls, but in our community as well. Uncles, family members, people that are close to you that you would never expect, brothers.
But why is that never talked about? It's always talked about. And even if we do, let's just say we do find out it's the uncle, the brother, the father. I've worked with plenty of little girls who have been sexually abused by those individuals. But these people just keep perpetuating this type of behavior, and nobody, I ain't gonna say nobody because that's a little bit over the top. It seems that there is not enough conditioning, or not enough, I guess,
education, maybe?
Education, accountability. I feel like there's just not enough around how do we teach little boys growing up that you should not be sexualizing a girl, at your age. Literally, I worked in the school system for a year, and all the girls kept complaining about, these girls are like 10 to 12. All they kept complaining about was how the boys consistently tried to make comments about their body. Whether they were curvy, whether they were, with nothing, they were literally having to deal with this every day going to school. And I'm like, well, where are the people? And now, granted, as professionals, we can only go so far, right? Because we only see these kids X amount of hours a day. But what is happening to where at home or in other places that these kids are, where they're not being taught how to respect women's bodies, like, or little girls' bodies, like, and it was bad. It was bad. So
I know. I got a 14-year-old in high school, and she's been hearing it ever since 5th, 6th grade. Little boys have been saying things like that to the girls. So it becomes an idea of, why do we continuously say, oh, the little girl shouldn't be wearing that, instead of the little boy shouldn't be saying that? Where is he getting that from? Where is that coming from? It's always, with so many situations in our society, fault always rests with the woman. This is where we get rape culture from. Fault rests with the woman. We can never just be the victim. It's our fault. So it doesn't make sense that we fault little girls and then make them pay for it. Like, you can't wear this, or you can't dance like this, or you can't express yourself this way because of them, instead of teaching them, don't be this way. This is not okay.
If you think about it, by saying that little girls, you can't do this because somebody's going to look at you a certain way, you kind of are putting the men out there too, because you're kind of like, if you look like this, they're going to be predators. So essentially, you're calling out the predators. We just don't know who we're calling out. And I think some of that comes from, and I won't say some of that, but sometimes in families, you see boys, uncles, men, and it's not only men and stuff like that, because we know that, girls that women can be predators too, but sometimes the family like to keep things hush hush. And so whenever the girl is raped, molested, whatever have you, there's a certain shame that comes with that, with even getting the molester in trouble. And so we keep that person just embedded in the family, and we keep on re-traumatizing everybody.
Mm-hmm. And that's from a systemic level, Shug. Like, okay, if we get this, Black man, Black brother, Black father in trouble. Now he's going into the system. Now he's gone forever, or gone for X
Yeah,
amount of
good
time.
point.
So now we got two different things going on. How do we protect our children, and then how do we protect him from going into the system,
Yeah.
which we know is not going to be fair anyway. It's like a double-edged sword.
Our community is failing at that. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous that little girls have to feel fearful to speak up when something happens to them like that. And it's even worse that they have to continue to endure that. I mean, even the image of, shit, I'm about to cry, y'all. Damn it.
It's
But
okay.
just the image that you get of a little girl in a home with adult men telling their parent, like their caregiver, like, this happened to me, and hearing like, no, it didn't. That's not what it was. It was actually this. And then having to go through that over and over and over again for years, that does a lot to your mental. So no wonder women want to protect their girls. Like, if you went through that as a parent right now, had I went through something like that in my childhood, I would probably be trying my best to control every move that my child makes. I would want to keep my eyes on her at all times. And that's just the response that you have without even being aware of it or acknowledging it. Like, it's just natural. Like, I want to make sure that my baby's safe. So there's a negative part of the sexualizing where people do it intentionally, trying to shame girls, and it's hurtful and it's harmful. But then there's still a little bit of this protective factor too from the caregivers who have experienced this, and they're just trying their best to keep their girls from experiencing the same thing.
You get some like in some scenarios where I know that there's a protective factor, but there's also trauma that like gets kind of put on the child even after they've been abused, to where they are told, well, she was the girlfriend of this adult male, or she, she somehow wanted it, or this was somehow the way that the family dynamics were. And then I think that's another way that we get girls believing that, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. This is, this happened to me. And so, and because you also get, this happened to me, so who are you? Why shouldn't it happen to you? Or you can expect this from a man.
But that's how they play it. And then the idea of, oh, well, boys will be boys. No, because then those boys turn into predators because you allowed that. You allowed them to think that it was okay because they're just boys and this is how boys act. And no, it's not okay. So we say things and continue to perpetuate this trauma continuously. And then we tell girls, well, we told you not to wear it. You wore it, so it's your fault, instead of it's their fault for harming you.
You know what I teach my daughters is, I don't know if any of y'all were taught growing up that, like, if a boy is mean to you, then he likes you. I hate that. It bothers all
I
of my soul.
absolutely hate it.
So I
It's
tell my daughter, if he's mean to you, it's not because he likes you. If he's mean to you, it's because he's a jerk. And so, because somebody who likes you would not be mean to you. And I know that we've been taught that, and there may even be a little bit of modicum of truth to it, to where the boy doesn't know how to express his emotions. So he might be mean, or, throw things at you, or just kind of, express them in a childish way. But when you teach them that that's not the truth, then you also teach them to set a standard, to whereas if you are going to like me, you're going to treat me as I'm supposed to be treated. And if you teach them that, that can bleed over into sexuality, because it's very mean to put your hands on somebody. When I was in the 7th grade, I was in the 8th grade. This dude walked up in class and put a shaboinker on my arm. And like, I was mortified. First of all, I didn't have any clue of like how that's supposed to feel, what that's supposed to look like. When I think about it, I should have probably told somebody, but it was like a funny thing for people. And they was like, oh, that happened to her. And they were laughing. I was embarrassed. I couldn't stand him after that. I didn't look at him the same after that. And it's just a lot of the girls liked him and they thought that that was okay. And, you know, I mean, he was handsome for being 13, 14 years old. So they thought that that was okay. And it's just those behaviors like that. Why would he think that something like that was okay? Where did he get it from? People saying, oh, he's so cute, so you can get away with anything. And then that's how we end up getting predators.
So I have, grown up with a lot of boys. I used to walk home with a couple of boys from school. And there were moments where they'd say or try to do things to me that at the time, I didn't know to say no. I didn't know, nobody ever taught me. Like, I just went with it. And then I got to college, and it wasn't until, like, the teacher had said something, and I was like, oh, that's what was happening. But I didn't know at the time. So it's interesting how a lot of possibly young girls don't get that education from their parents. My mom was at work. My dad at the time wasn't in my life. So I was out here just in the free world, just having inappropriate things done that I didn't even understand to even know to report or even know to tell somebody. Because, they have those manipulative tactics where, when you're young, you're like, if somebody tells you they're not going to be your friend anymore, you start feeling like guilty, like, oh my God, if I don't do this, they're not going to be my friend, or they're going to tell somebody or whatever. So, and then I've been sexually assaulted before, at age 22. I was 22, and I told somebody, and I told actually that person's brother, because me and him had a college class together, and he downplayed it, and he was like, no, Keish, there's no way. He was like, you just couldn't handle it, like literally downplaying it. And so I kind of just was like, okay, well, maybe that didn't, I started to psych myself out, like, well, maybe I was just over dramatic. A year later, he called me to apologize. A year later, because they found out he was sexually assaulting their sister. And so he apologized to me, and he was like, you told me a year ago, I didn't believe you, and this person was doing this whole time to our baby sister. So I often think about how many little girls have tried to come forward and they were not believed, or didn't know how to verbalize certain things that was going on with them, or accepted it because they thought, if I don't, what are the repercussions for me? So I put it in the past. I've already healed from it, but that's my story.
Can you maybe tell me how, like, or talk about how you healed from it? Like, if it's not triggering, like, what are some things that you've kind of gone through, like, for your healing process?
For a long time, I was angry. For a long time, I didn't deal with certain types of men. And it wasn't until, now obviously I wasn't a therapist then, so I couldn't, be like, actually walk myself through any like coping or interventions at the time. But I started to be more around people who were more supportive, and starting to understand what it was like to have self-worth, self-esteem. I was around men who showed me differently. And the men who were in my life treated me with the utmost respect, and they're still my best friends to this day. And so they were the guys that were like, I got to see how women were treated by other men who were good men. And so I knew then, okay, this is how I'm supposed to be treated, not like that. And I don't really tell that story. Not very many people know that story. Like, not very many people know I've been sexually assaulted, because I come off very like direct, bossy. I ain't taking no shit from nobody. Like, that's how I come off. So to know, like, some people, a couple of people I have told, they get shocked. They're like, really? That happened? Like, yeah, that happened. But so I would say that I've just been able to be shown a different path. And it's still a learning process. Now, obviously, I would never today. I would never But I also am able to kind of show my nephew, who's 4 years old, things that he shouldn't do and things he should be saying, and making sure that he grows up to be the respectful man that he should be. So I'm taking what I learned from other men and also hopefully passing that on to my nephew to make sure I don't ever got to hear that he's ever touched a woman inappropriately, ever. So,
well, it's amazing that you were shown that men can be good, and you didn't have to live with that perspective or that image of men your entire life. A lot of girls, a lot of women don't get that. Like they get thrown into these cycles, not thrown in, but they get into this cycle of like abusive relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, and their thoughts about men are always proved right. Like, men are bad, men are terrible, I just need to stay away from men. Or maybe it's something wrong with me. I'm not worthy of being loved by a good man, so I'm just going to stick with the men that I'm used to being around. Yeah. So it's really great that you had that evidence that there are great men in this world. Not all men are terrible. Not all men are predators. Not all men want to hurt women. There are good, supportive, loving, caring men in this world.
Right.
And there are a lot of girls that just don't get to see that.
Right. And the men who were in my life, like something else did come up with another guy, but I ended up telling my best friend about it. He got on that phone and called that dude up like, excuse me, we need to get some clarification here. What happened? So it was that protection in that moment that I needed to know that somebody, if I told that to, they would have my back. Because obviously the first guy I told didn't believe me. So, it was good to hear, like, no matter what, these people got my back. And I just love them. So shout out to my best friends. And hopefully I don't cry, but I love them. And they always got my back.
Yeah. It sounded like you needed that at that moment, like for somebody to protect you. Absolutely. I remember telling my brother something to that effect, like, I felt like this was some inappropriate touching going on, and that's how he came with it.
Yeah. My best friend will drive his car through somebody's house. We often talk about bail money. Bail money. Call my wife. I was like, okay.
Yeah, but for real though, like, I would need some bail money if I ever. My mom used to say, like, now listen here. She was so adamant about it. She used to say, like, nobody touching you down there, right? And I'm like, no, I'm a little girl, no. And she's like, now, if they do and they say, I'm gonna kill your mom or your dad or your grandmother, don't believe them, because can't nobody kill me. And so, like, I thought she was like this shero. Like, I knew if somebody did it, then I can come to her. And then, like, at me in the meantime, I was thinking, well, what if they do it and then they're going to kill me in the meantime? So, I'm going to just say, okay, and then I'm telling later. Either way it went, somebody was going to need some bail money. And it was going to be him because, like, you were going to jail. But everybody don't have that to where they can tell. And everybody doesn't have that mother that's like, or that father, that person that comes in and is like, I'm sorry, what happened? Okay, it's going down. Some kids are just being touched and molested and things are happening to them and nobody is their protection. And so they just have to live with it, grow up, and we'll find out all about it later on. And that's not okay. And so shoot, that protection for you, even to pass on to your nephew, this is happening to you. Can't nobody do nothing to me. You come to me. So, I mean, I won't call it a blessing because, that's not nothing that should happen to you. But what came out of it, you passing down to the next generation.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And this brings up a really valid part of it all. We could talk about sexualizing young girls and it stemming from protection and various other avenues, but ultimately, it also boils down to being believed when you say somebody did something. My mother was very clear. I will always believe you first. I don't care what somebody say, what they show me, I'm going to believe you first. And it always bothers me now parents will say that they will. I've heard parents, particularly some dads that I know, say that they would believe their child, but then I see them not believe other children. And I'm like, but what if it was yours? And they try to separate it out like, but it's not. It wouldn't be mine. It could be yours. And even if you say you would believe her, people don't realize kids pay attention to what you say about other people. So if they hear you saying, that girl she asked for it, or she lying, they're not gonna tell you, because the first thing they're gonna think is, oh well, shoot, he don't believe her, and that little girl, he ain't gonna believe me either. I'm not telling my dad. So you have to let these children know, I will believe you, and I'm riding to the sunset with you.
We ride at dawn.
Right. We
Right.
we ride at dawn, and people gonna get hurt, because without that, it's like kids don't know who to go to, who can protect them. They don't have that. So it's hard to tell. It's hard enough to talk about it. How hard would it be to tell somebody that something happened to you if you don't think they're gonna believe you? So research about male victimization, sexualization, sexual abuse only just began to appear in 1980, according to the research that I've looked at. So that means historically, you will not find much information about males who've been sexually assaulted or raped for various reasons. Men tend to not want to talk about it or discuss it. It's hard for men to place themselves in the shoe of victim. It's hard for them to consider themselves a victim. So historically speaking, for Black males in particular, the sexualization of them goes all the way back to slavery. When you consider the bucks and how they were looked upon on the selling block, just you have to be strong, you have to have a certain physique. That all ties into sexualization as well. So when we think about this from that perspective, how do we feel about little boys growing up now? Little Black boys or little boys of any culture growing up now? Do we feel like they are still sexualized?
Well, I'm looking at an article from BBC News, and for those who don't know, BBC is British broadcast, and it's actually a news station. And studies show that only 16% said that the police, when they report sexual assault, guided them towards support services, and that Black boys are actually assaulted at the same rate as white boys. And so I think that that's not talked about enough, and that is not talked about because in the male psyche, you know what I mean? They're supposed to be strong. They're not supposed to get sexually assaulted. You don't want people to know that you're sexually assaulted. And I don't know if y'all remember Martin from A Thin Line Between Love and Hate, where he was like, she was harassing me. And the police was like making fun of him, like, oh, she harassing you. And like, she was getting away with harassment because he was a man. And so I think that that goes into the same thing with a sexual assault. Oh, okay, she sexually assaulted you. Yeah, okay. Or you were sexually assaulted. And so it makes you look like less of a man if it was by another man. And if it was by a female, then it makes you look soft.
When I think about sex in general, when it's either with women or men, I think that with men it's more glorified, versus with women it's more categorized as shameful. And so when men get sexually assaulted, it isn't categorized that. It isn't, the conversation is never framed around assault. It's framed around glorification of an allegiance, or a ego boost, or a, what is the word when you get like put into like a hazing, there we go, like some sort of
Yeah.
hazing into
Yeah.
like a group. And so when I see or hear the discrepancies of reporting, that would make sense because sex for boys or even men is often glorified rather than taken seriously as this could go the wrong way. Like people don't talk about it when it comes to men going the wrong way.
But see,
Yeah.
it's interesting because we've been so far more so talking about men, but boys, like, it's a conflict to me because we don't want, like, when the police do something to a young black man, a young black boy, and he's younger, he's underage, we say that is a boy. Stop looking at him like he is a man. That's not a grown man, that's a young boy. But now it's like a flip. Like, the black men in the community see these really young boys like, you got to be a man. I mean, it's okay, you could be a man. And even losing your virginity for a boy is different. Like, if a boy loses his virginity at 12, 13, it does not seem to be an issue, and it's an issue.
There was a certain, like, I mean, and there are a lot of people who have been assaulted. Let me just go ahead and say that, even like especially in the entertainment industry. But there was a certain rapper who thought, maybe I should get my son a hooker, and this is going to make him a man. And the interwebs went crazy about it. It was, some people were saying, oh, that boy was raped by that girl because he was 14 and she was a grown woman. And then other people were like, he got to lose it sometime. Like, other people were glorifying what happened when, all in all, no matter how she was gotten, that's assault on a minor.
That makes me think about the term that we use, the cougar term, where you have an older woman who's attracted to younger men. And I know it's not always in reference to young boys. A lot of the times it's like young adults, but just that dynamic is also a really unhealthy mindset too. But it's glorified. Like, if you're a cougar, it's okay. It's okay to be a cougar. Oh, you like young men. Like, yeah, that's okay. But when it comes to girls and you have older men who are attracted to younger girls, then it's not okay. And that's kind of where it gets sticky because the dynamic is the same. You have an older person of a different gender or a different sex that's attracted to a younger person, but for girls it's okay, and for boys it's okay, and for girls it's not. So a lot of boys get sexually assaulted by older women and heads are turned because it's okay.
I think it's because the way society perceives women as non-threatening. So when it's a woman, an older woman on a younger guy, or even on a child, it's more of seeing a woman in a more nurturing role and a more caregiver role than they see as a more threatening role. And so when it's a switch and a man is on a girl, we see men as more threatening, more dangerous. So I'm assuming, and that's just my thought process as to why it's not equally an issue. And I think it's because of the perception of how we perceive as being docile, submissive, not scary, non-threatening, versus men are not viewed in that manner. Even though both of them was wrong, I don't know.
Think of how many like teachers, and it's a lot of times it's female teachers, like how they have sex with the students, like the young male students, and like how it depends. I think it depends on the setting. So like when you get the teacher who kept getting pregnant by the student, she was like villainized. It was like, no, this is not your boyfriend. He's 12. Like, you're pregnant by him and you're wrong. But when it's in regular society, like you said, it's glorified.
I mean, I think it gender dynamics and gender bias plays a major role that we've always had when it comes to boys, girls, men, women. There's always been this dynamic of um, double standard. There's always been that double standard in so many areas. So you have boys can lose their virginity younger and it's seen as a notch on their belt or something that they need to get to manhood. Girls, save it. You have to save yourself because you're giving something away. Meanwhile, a boy is taking something. So it's this power thing. Men are power. Boys learn power. So if that's how you raise boys and girls, then that would explain why there's so many differences when it comes to sexualization. Even something as small as, they got the little onesies that say Mr. Handsome or Mr. This, like it's putting some things on a baby boy that you would never see for a baby girl. I saw a baby boy's onesie that said Mr. Sexy Little Man. I said, if that said sexy little girl, they would be taking it very differently.
Ah.
When you talk about the power and how boys are raised to be in that position of power, think about what it means for a little boy who has lost that power, but still has to somehow keep up that, like, this
Image.
facade that he has the power, right? So you have a little boy who was sexually assaulted by an older woman or an older man,
Mm-hmm.
and he's still being raised as if he's supposed to be the powerful one in relationships in the world, and having to put on that face and still go through every day knowing that you're losing that power, you're losing that control on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, whatever, by whoever. That's a hard thing to deal with too. So it's not just how society is viewing it in terms of whether it's okay or not okay for boys versus girls, but it's also what's happening to this child.
Or it could be reversed when we start to talk about men who are overly aggressive or that toxic masculinity. It can get reversed when you snatch that power away. Now to get it back, I have to overcompensate. It was taken from me, and now I have to overcompensate to show that yes, I am powerful, and nobody can take anything from me again. Kind of mindset.
And we probably need to look at that because I know that the internet is always throwing out toxic masculinity, and it's like, what's the why? Maybe that's one of the reasons why there's toxic masculinity. It's because a lot of people were taken advantage of, and some people are just not here for it. Some people don't know who they are in the world because of that, and so, like you said, they're overcompensating. But I don't think we're soft enough on those people, or we are understanding enough to what they might have went through. And I didn't think about that until you just said that.
Mm-hmm.
So, we all know that there's this one person, and he has a big long history. He's now in jail for assaulting a bunch of women and exerting a dominance over a lot of women, and just using his power to be the boss of a bunch of women. And so he's in jail now. But I do want to point out that hurt people, and I don't think that that's pointed out enough, that even though somebody might have been hurt or somebody might have hurt a whole bunch of people, there's always, okay, y'all know Auntie Sugar always say there's always the why. So sometimes there's a why in the reason why they're hurting people, and it's totally not validating them or saying, you know what, that's good. He should have hurt this person or he should be vindicated. But it does speak to the fact that when people are hurt, they inflict that harm on other people.
Yeah, I struggle with that saying. I know it's true. I do not deny that it's true that hurt people, but I struggle so much with it because it's hard to hear that as anything other than a possible justification.
I feel that the reason why some of this stuff continued on for so long is because there was a lot of industry men who allowed this to happen and didn't say anything. I know that a lot of people are going to deflect to the parents, but they can. I'm going to deflect to the industry men who were around there, who knew what was going on. And the one person that I did know that called him out, which he did an interview, was DMX. God rest his soul. But I heard the interview where DMX called him out. And, DMX don't care. So he literally was going off. And so I thought that more men should have done the same thing, but they didn't. And so it just, to me, shows that we are willing to keep people in these higher level positions or this position of power just based off talent. And there's a lot of people that is still in positions that probably shouldn't be in positions, but they're there because they're talented. They make good music. And instead, we don't look at the bigger picture of them harming our little boys and little girls who have to grow up with this damage and then might also perpetrate on other people and also develop some sort of clinical disorder, clinical mental health disorder.
Yeah, and speaking in terms of justification, I mean, for me, it's like, yes, hurt people, absolutely. Kids learn by modeled behavior. So if something happens to them or they see something happen to someone else, as a very young child, you don't recognize that some things are right or wrong. You just see it, this person's doing it, this person of power or authority is doing this thing, so it's okay. So if I go do it to other people, that's fine too.
Yeah.
So I would have empathy earlier on, but when you start to realize that it's not okay anymore and someone calls you out on it and you still look and say like, well, that's only one person out of 50 people. So that means I'm still doing something right, or this is still okay, or I don't care, I'm still going to do it. That's where there's no more justification. There's no more empathy. There's no more compassion, because at this point, you know that it's not okay and you still continue to do it and you still continue to hurt other people because you are hurt instead of dealing with your own shit and moving forward from there.
I wanted to piggyback on something. When we in school, we did a project in my master's program. We did a project on the subway guy who, I think his name was Jared, who got put in jail for sexually abusing kids. And one of the things he talked about in one of his like clips that they caught him was grooming children, and how he like got them to trust him and, you know, said little things to them that they would be attracted to or be okay with, like offering them something, or, you know, putting your hand on their shoulder, just some sort of embrace or some sort of comfort. So I think Amber is right. Like, you can, you know, try to get these kids to do things if they trust you and if you're a person in power. And so one of the things around this big star who is in jail now was people were talking about, well, why didn't these kids say something, or why did they do this? And I'm like, these is kids. Of course they're going to trust this individual because this person has power. You don't know what he's saying to them. Like, if you say this, I'm not going to give you this. You know how teenagers and kids are? They're more reward focused. So of course, if I'm going to keep a secret and you reward me with something, guess what? I'm going to go ahead through what you want me to do because I want whatever you're going to give me. That's how they think. So I think grooming is a very important thing we don't talk about enough. We just automatically assume somebody just agreed to having sex with someone that was older than them, when in actuality, they've been grooming this person for weeks, for months, for years. And now you have this trusted individual that can just do whatever because that's what they think they're supposed to do.
I have a story about grooming. So right after I was probably about 21, and I was working at it's like a place in Colorado, and it's a workforce center. And so I worked with people who got out of jail. They were felons and they spent a long time in jail and they needed jobs. And so part of my job was to help them find a job. And there was a sexual predator, and he was so nice and he was so sweet, and he was an older guy. But what he did was he showed how nice and how sweet he was all the time. And, you know, I made some mistakes in my past, but, you know, I'm through that now. And then he did start doing little things like that. Like he did touch my arm, or, you know, he touched my arm, like my elbow sometimes, and be like, you know, all right, well then see you later. And I was unaware, and I was 21 years old and I didn't know. And they had to take him off my case because they were like, he's trying to groom you. And so he has spent, I think, 18 or 19 years in jail, and he still got out with the same psyche, and he was still doing the same thing. And for me, I do have a certain level of empathy, and I have a certain level of empathy because if I was a 21-year-old, and like I said, it's not a justification because I mean, I don't justify any of it. But when I was 21 years old, this was happening to me. So as a young child, if this is happening for years and you don't understand what's happening, and like you said, we model behavior, he's been imprinted on. Like, people get imprinted on, and then they perpetuate that behavior. Wrong, yes. People should hold you accountable, yes. But at what point, I always think of, was the psyche just changed? And it's unfortunate for everybody that was around him. But at what point, what did the change happen to where this person could not flip the switch back to, okay, this is just wrong? And at what point was it like, my pleasure centers are liking this, and so I'm addicted?
You know what, Auntie Suge? I like that you said that. Like, at what point did the switch flip to where they no longer saw it as wrong? And I struggle with that because here's how I view it. If you have to remain in secrecy or deception or have to lie about it, then you know it's wrong. That's how I always kind of view things. So even if you can't stop it, say you can't stop the impulses, you are someone who assaults children or is attracts children, whatever, even if you can't control the impulses, you know it's wrong because of how you go about it. You have to groom and you have to hide and you have to deceive and you have to lie. So if it was right in your mind, you wouldn't have to do all of that. But you know that you do because you know it's not okay.
I would slightly disagree with that. Just because at some point it becomes so in mental health, when you're talking about the different types of disorders, personality disorders are within their own little thing, right? Because sometimes it's characterological, like you are born with certain personality traits and it's never going to change. And sometimes something happened to you, and like Suge is saying, for a really long time, it's ingrained in you, it's imprinted, and then it completely changes the way that you think about things. And at that point, it becomes a personality disorder. So no, you don't know that it's wrong. With certain personality disorders, deception is just something that you do, whether you know that it's wrong or not. It's part of your personality at that point. So I guess like when Suge's talking about changing your psyche like completely, I'm thinking of a complete personality change, and that's something that can't be reversed. And often
Yeah.
can't really be treated.
True.
Well, also, if you add it with an addiction, your brain is changed. We talk about your brain. Yeah, we talk about your brain being changed as an addict, and after a while, they lie. They sneak around to get the things that they want, and that's a part of the grooming and actually, trying to be sneaky to get these people to like them and personality change. I'm sorry, Keisha, you go ahead.
No, I was going to back you up on that about the brain changes because you are right. Sometimes when that pleasure is stimulated, it is very hard because we have those neurochemicals going up, which is the dopamine factor or the dopamine. And that gives you a sense of pleasure. I always call it the dangerous D. So because you want to feel that pleasure. And, and I say it all the time because you try to feel that pleasure with anything. And if that means you get stimulated by that in your brain can be very dangerous trying to increase that dopamine. And I would assume that if something was stimulated in that person's brain, they're going to want to go back and continue to be stimulated by whatever it is. And while we don't justify it, I think there could be a neural part that changes as well.
Well, then also narcissism. There's a certain level of narcissism that goes into the sexual abuse of another person because you're only worried about your own pleasure. You're not worried about the pain that you're inflicting on somebody else. And that, with anything, even if this person didn't have a disorder, but they had substance abuse or something like that, there's a certain level of narcissism that goes into hurting another person. And I think that should always be taken into account. And so, like, when I was talking about how hurt people, I mean, you could transform somebody into a narcissist. And I wonder if that's what happens a lot of the time.
With that whole situation with that person, he was a perpetrator on young girls, but he was also a victim of sexual abuse as a child too. And I know we were talking about cougars earlier preying on young boys, but there's also some research that says that perpetrators on young boys are men as well. So I just wanted to get y'all's thoughts on that.
So when it comes to male perpetrators onto boys, I think there's a lot of misconstrued conversations around that. Like people immediately think because a man perpetrated on a boy that he's gay. And that is not, those are two separate things. But I think that the conversation around perpetrators, male versus boys, is a hard topic to talk about or even address because everybody ties it to the LGBTQ community, and it should not be tied to that. But they do it anyway, and I think that makes it harder for young boys to come out to say that they've been sexually assaulted, and to address this at a higher level, or because we're not getting the reports like we should. We know that boys are being sexually assaulted, especially by males, but nobody's talking about it because it's associated to homophobia. I mean, to LGBTQ community, and that should be separate.
And you know what, Keith, you hitting on something right there. And so I'm going to input a lot of the research because I've been doing a lot of research about this. And it is a misconception that because somebody is even a homosexual, that they're the ones that's gonna perpetrate the sexual act on a young boy. And a lot of times, if you know it's male on male, then it does make you a homosexual. But I think that those perpetrators do that because they probably want to express those desires and they choose an easy target. But there is a lot of research around the fact that people believe that gay people will abuse children, and it's not necessarily true. It's not true at all, actually. Just because you're gay doesn't mean that you're gonna abuse a child. But that's the assumption, and that came from history. Like there's historical evidence that even from the Roman times, that they stopped it because grown men were having sex with younger boys in the name of homosexuality, but then they put an age limit on it. And so I think that that's just come down, and it's just kept on getting perpetuated even by the British, and it just moved right into America, and it just got imprinted in people's mindsets that, oh, if they're gay, they're going to molest children. And it's just not true. If you're going to molest a child, it's because you're a child molester and not because you're gay.
Thank you. That's where I that's where I was hoping you would get to. Being homosexual, gay, whatever, does not equate to pedophile, because that is what they do. You are not a pedophile just because you're a gay man. All gay men aren't pedophiles. And to go further into that, every gay man was not harmed as a child, because that's a thought too. Oh, you must have been touched as a child. That's why you gay. Did a man touch you when you were a young boy? No, every gay man was not sexually harmed as a child.
I do want to add that there is some research, and not that every gay man was harmed as a child, but there is some research to the contrary saying that being harmed as a child does change some thoughts about your sexuality, and it does cause some confusion. And that doesn't necessarily make people gay. People are gay because they're gay, but there is some confusion sometimes brought into the fold when people are harmed like that. But that's just with any kind of harm. With trauma, it changes the way you react to situations. And so even with sexual trauma, it could change that, or it can confuse some people and they don't know who to go to. So if I'm abused by a bunch of men, I might look at men and say that they're too aggressive for me, and I might want to be associated with women because women are softer and I haven't been hurt by women. And so you don't even necessarily know if it changes the sexuality, but it does change the way you think about gender roles.
All I know is that if somebody touched my nephew, I'm put my foot off in your ass. Period.
And there you have it. There you
Period.
have it. Funny enough, when you said that, it made my thought come back. Now I know exactly what I wanted to say because you said that. The confusion that Auntie Shug was talking about, it does cause confusion. That's another thing with young boys, I think, that may keep them from talking about if they've been harmed, because their body naturally reacts to being touched. So they think, did I like it or did I cause this? Like, they have those questions because for a boy, they have an erection and it has nothing to do with if they are really enjoying the situation. It's just their body's natural response. They don't know if they're at fault. Like, I must have liked it, and they're very confused about that.
Mm-hmm. It's a very sensitive topic, and I don't know. My heart goes out to people who have had that, done to them. Obviously, you know, I show a lot of empathy for people who have been harmed and have that kind of trauma, and it's hard as a therapist because you know the victims who have had that trauma done to them. And so you empathize with the victims and you're like, it's not your fault. That should have never been done to you. But then even as a therapist, we might have to talk to some perpetrators. And so that's why I'm always coming through with but why? Because I know that there's always some reasons why things happen or why people feel like they have to do this to somebody else. And so it can get pretty sticky in there too, because you have to be able to empathize with both sides. And some people can't, and that's okay. I'm one that I try to empathize with both sides because I know that a lot of times there's a little hurt little boy inside of some people that are hurting other people.
All right. So, one of the things that I think is important when we look at boys being perpetrated on versus girls tend to be more depressed, suicidal. Boys and men tend to use substances, engage heavily because they are trying to possibly put whatever happened to them behind them. And one way to cope is by using drugs. So I'm not saying all people or all men who use drugs have been perpetrated or sexually assaulted, but I think that that's one way to, see a sign of seeing what's going on if there's an excessive use. So I would just be very cautious and aware of what those signs look like. And if your son is having some behaviors that are unusual, sometimes they immediately withdraw and maybe not say anything, or they may be acting out in a way that just isn't a typical behavior of theirs. So just be looking forward to looking at the behavior changes.
I want to piggyback on that, Keish. That is really, really good. And I noticed that you said that if if your son is exhibiting some of the behaviors and withdrawing, but also some people, and this is a very big sum, have the child that's the perpetrator. And the hard thing about that is knowing that your child is a perpetrator, knowing that your child is molesting somebody else in the house, or friends that come over, and how to report that. And I think that the fear comes in when we feel like, well, I don't want my kid in the prison system, or I don't want my kid in trouble because of what they're doing. Because once it's somebody that's related to you, you can see the pathology in it. And so if you're noticing that your child is exhibiting some sexual behaviors, they may have had something done to them, or if they're actually perpetrating that on somebody else, get them to some help immediately. Psychologist, a counselor, whether you have Medicaid, no matter what kind of insurance you have, you can find someone that will help you out with that problem, just so that they don't grow up and they don't end up being the person that perpetuates that trauma on somebody else. Early intervention is the best intervention if you notice those behaviors in your child.
I definitely agree, Auntie Shug. You have to hold your children accountable too. I think that's what people forget. If it was somebody else harming their child, they would want that person held accountable. So you have to hold your child, if they are the perpetrator, early intervention, hold them accountable, get them the help that they need so that they don't grow up and it possibly be worse. Or you can correct things if you get to it early enough. I think my takeaway would be helping young boys speak up, because we know that young boys, in general, people who are harmed, whether male, female, whoever, find it really hard to speak up about what was done to them and to advocate for themselves. So start really young. Like when I say young, I mean your 1 and 2 year old boys should know, hey, if somebody touches you in on your penis or in that area, you tell me. It's okay to tell me. We tell our girls that from young ages, but maybe not our boys. Like have the doctor reiterate that when they go to doctor's appointments. Only mommy or daddy or a doctor, if mommy or daddy is here, can look in this area. So teaching young boys really young that it's okay to tell me if someone touches you is really important, because they will remember that you said that as their parent.
And I might accidentally take us out of the floor real quick, because there was the comment about only mommy or daddy can be the ones to touch your private parts. And I know that is, like, I teach my kids that too, without thinking
What if
Well, I
mom and
trust
dad
my
is
husband,
perpetrating?
but there a lot of the times, yeah, there is mom or dad who are the perpetrators of sexual abuse, and like how do you navigate that, or I don't know. Just that comment kind of sparked that thought too. Is only mommy and daddy can look, but if daddy is the one that's touching, then that becomes a problem. And how do you navigate that for the kid?
So that's a difficult one to navigate because if you're teaching somebody, that, only mom and dad can touch this, like you said, then, and that's happening to them, I think that's going to be a difficult one because we're talking about what people should teach their kids, right? Just that if it doesn't feel right is probably a good thing to say. Like if it doesn't feel right, then it's probably not right. And also I tell my kids, now somebody might say, I'm going to hurt you if you tell anybody that I did this. And it's going to be a difficult situation because sometimes you get some dangerous predators. And I always tell my kids, I'm like, if you have to play dead or go numb, but nothing is ever a secret when that is involved. And so that's how I kind of get past the mommy and daddy thing, is like, it's never a secret if somebody's touching you there. Because then if you get a child that says, I was touched there, then they're not keeping that secret and you can find out if it's mommy or daddy.
I often encourage when I work with children who have been sexually assaulted, typically it depends on developmental age. So with children, like smaller children, 0 to 5 or 0 to 8, they tend to play things out. So they'll use like whatever that they're playing with or withdrawing, and they will kind of do things or say things or act out things that may look awkward or may look just different. And so that is when you can step in and kind of ask these questions or open-ended questions about, hey, like, what do you mean by this? Why are you taking off her clothes? What does this mean when the dolls are like on a top of each other? Like, what position are they in? Like, asking those investigative questions. Typically with children, and I would say specifically children, they may have other behaviors like bedwetting or just a change in their behavior at school. They start to act out more. They just have these bizarre or just unusual behaviors happening. So sometimes to like differentiate if it's mom or dad, typically if a behavior change happens, that's when you can start asking questions and get the child to trust you to tell you who's been doing what to them. And if it happens to be a parent, that's a way to kind of try to pull that out. Um, and sometimes children can't talk, so not can't talk, but rather not say it. You can have them write it down. You can have them tell you, like, in different forms of communication. Doesn't always have to be verbal. So that's how I typically, help parents figure out if it's a perpetrator, if the perpetrator is another parent, have them do it other ways.
Yeah, and a lot of the times what I see is that and I'm not saying all the time because I'm sure there are some exceptions to this, but a lot of the times if one of the parents is doing it, from my experience, the other one knows or suspects and just is in denial about it and doesn't want to break up the home or doesn't want the other parent to get in trouble or end up in jail or whatever, so they don't really say anything. But I mean that is essentially hurting your child for the long term. Yeah. And increasing the risk that your child is going to hurt other people too. So where Auntie Keish was talking about that cycle before, that never-ending cycle, every time that a child is repeatedly assaulted or hurt in this way and it's not addressed, there is an increased risk that they are going to go and hurt other people in the same way, maybe multiple people. And then it's stemming from those people and they're going to hurt more people. So even if you don't have children and it's not your child, that doesn't mean you can't watch out for the signs either. It's not always going to be your child that you're looking at. It's not always going to be your child that you're monitoring. You have nieces, you have nephews, you're a teacher, you work with kids, just keep a lookout for these kids. Ask them questions. People seem to be just, I don't know, uncomfortable with asking kids questions and using the real words. Ask them. Right. And if they don't want to tell you, like Auntie Keish was saying, have them draw a picture, have them write a letter, but check in with the kids and ask them questions.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you're going to find out.
And one other thing this is the last thing I'm going to say about it. Stop all communities, our community, any community, stop being quiet about adults who you know are perpetrators. There are literally adults and families who the entire family knows they are a perpetrator and they still get to come around. And their victims are right there at Thanksgiving dinner and they still get to be present. And that's not okay. You can find out the why and they can get their help elsewhere, but they do not need to be present near children or with victims they've already harmed in that family. So stop keeping that quiet. We have got to speak up about those members in our families.
I was just gonna say that, but I was gonna say about the celebrities. But what
That too.
what Auntie
That too.
Ashley said, stop doing that shit. Like cut it. Like our kids gotta suffer because we choose to stay silent about things that are continue to be harmful for our community. That's harmful. You are doing harm to your children, to your nieces, your nephews that you continue to ignore. It is harm. Period. There is no feeling on my booty and slow wind and all that. No.
No.
No, no, you are doing harm,
I
period.
got something to say to that too. As far as when you guys say stop, I also agree with that and believe your children because some kids are just not believed, and that right there, it always befuddles me how you like. Oh well, I didn't know if it was true or not. It's not up to you. It's not up to the therapist. It's not up to the teacher to investigate if it's true. It's up to people to report it and let child protective services or whoever decide and investigate and detectives to find out if it's true. But when we decide, I just got to make sure that it's true because I don't want to get this person in trouble. We do a disservice to that child because the child is then still put in the same position with this adult, and you know dang on well it may be true. If I know it might be true, you can't come around my kids. Because guess what? I don't want them victimized a second, third, or fourth time. I have to sleep. I have to go to the bathroom. There can be little touches throughout the day. We have to start believing people first and asking questions later. And with that one, I'm going to shoot first and I'll ask questions way later.
Yep.
And then you on top of that to not believing your children and not believing, I guess, that there are people in your life that can do this, because we'll look at our brothers and our uncles and grandparents and say like, no, like I trust they would never do anything like that. That's crazy. But one of the other things too is that sometimes there's some shame and maybe guilt or blaming with the parent too. So finding out that your child has been sexually assaulted or abused or whatever term you want to use, there could maybe it's my fault. Maybe I don't want to say anything because I don't want somebody to think that I wasn't supervising my child or that, I'm a bad parent or whatever. And I get it, but you got to get the fuck over yourself because at the end of the day, you are messing up your child. Your child is not going to be able to cope with this on their own. They need support. Just like Auntie Key says, she going to whoop somebody's ass if they touch her nephew. Your kids need you to come behind them like that. So if you got some kind of feeling, shame, blame, whatever you have, you work that out within yourself, but you help your kid first. And then you deal with that later on.
So thanks for watching. We know that this episode may have had some triggering points. We understand that people go through things and some of the people may have gone through some of the things that we discussed in this episode. So we just want to encourage everybody, if you see something, say something. And that's very powerful because children can't advocate for themselves, so somebody has to advocate for them. Thank you for watching. And at the end of this, once again, we're going to put out our resources.
Thanks for watching, y'all. Go ahead and check out our resources here. And don't forget to join us next week where we will be hearing directly from victims of sexual abuse. If you want to hear their stories, don't miss it. Join us next week, Wednesday, February 8th, same time, same place. See y'all then.